It is Sunday, April 26th. Welcome to the third episode of the Ken and Glenn Show with the guy named Scott, with this week's special guest, strategist and marketer, Kyle Wilson. And now, Ken and Glenn. Oh, and me, a guy named Scott.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, Ken. Hey, Scott.
You just had a birthday, Glenn, and happy birthday.
I was 60 last Sunday, and this Sunday I'm 61 and excited about it. Yeah, we had a big birthday bash on Friday, and my lovely wife, Carolyn, lied to me, and lying is such an important part of life. She told me that I was having a one-on-one with my friend Charlie Bowden via a Zoom call, and like a fool, I took the bait and went in, and when I opened up the link, there were 95 of my students from the acting workshop, the studio we have here in Dallas, all screaming out, "Happy birthday." And they made me the most adorable video. It's been a while. I cry fairly often. I'm a tender sort of fellow, but I don't usually get brought to tears by happy things. I just get happy, and that's where it stops. But I was pouring tears throughout that entire video, and it's just one of those feel-good opportunities. You know, friends are irreplaceable. So it was an extraordinary day.
Very, very cool.
Hello, Ernest.
Wow. So yeah, I was there, and it was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. The whole thing was incredible. So Rebecca, is she part of?
She is.
Yeah,
part of the
that's what I
extra.
thought. Yeah, surprise. You were in shock. It was actually, you were really in shock. It was pretty cool.
Well, folks don't get me too often, and I mean, really get me good. And I've been a practical joker my whole life. So when somebody gets me, it's impressive.
Yeah. So, hey, we have a special guest on tonight.
We do.
I'm pretty excited about. I think you guys are.
And I'm excited about our topic as well.
Our topic. You want to?
And I'm also excited about the two things that we talk about every week. Well, that's just wrong. Ooh, well, that's just wrong. And the best thing I saw this week. So we got both of those coming up as well a little bit later on in the program.
Yeah.
I love it. So
I would love to hear our guests' take on that too.
Yes, absolutely. I think he needs to get ready with what he has seen. It makes him go, ooh, that's just wrong. And we want people to contribute that, our viewers to contribute what they saw as well. And the other thing is, what's the best thing that you saw this week? Is there something that you noticed this week that you want to share that was really, really, really neat? So we'll get to that a little bit later on in the program tonight. We're jam-packed here this evening.
Look at there. We got singer-songwriter Cat Hill out of Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
In the house. And tonight, our beloveds, we are talking about the subject of mentoring and who are your mentors, or singular mentor. Some of us have been blessed to have more than one mentor on our journey, and we thought that would make for a fascinating topic. And so please chime in with your thoughts about that.
Yes, we want to hear your feedback, and we also, let me throw this out there. We will publicly shame anyone on here that does not share this out, just so you know. I'm just kidding.
So
our show is in the guilt and shame. That's right.
Within 48 hours, within 48 hours, I've had reinforced for me the importance of lying and now shaming courtesy of It's really great. Scott, when you get a chance, you want to lead on the topic of manipulation and power and control?
Can we look, Scott, with your beautiful godlike voice, how about you welcome our guest to the show?
Talk about a person that really understands what tonight's topic is all about. He has been around some of the greatest of the greats in the field of personal development and professional growth. He is an agent. He is a manager. He is a strategist. He is a masterful marketer. It's our guest, Kyle Wilson. Kyle.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks, guys. This looks like a lot of fun. You guys are having a good time.
We always do, brother.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Awesome.
So Kyle well, Kyle, I'm going to let you tell a little bit. I mean, this isn't a full-blown interview, but we're here to have fun and talk. Tonight's topic is who is your mentor? Mine was Jimmy down the street. You have a pretty impressive mentor. Who is your primary mentor?
Well, Jim Rohn obviously had probably the greatest influence. My dad and Jim Rohn would be the top two. And so got to spend 18 amazing years with Jim Rohn. Happy to tell that story if you want me to.
I'd love to hear it. You guys want to hear it?
Absolutely.
I want to hear it too, but since they went in order, your dad first and then Jim, I would love to know what imprinting your dad left upon you that you regarded as significant.
Yeah, my dad was an amazing guy. Just incredible work ethic, incredibly honest, hardworking, kind. I don't know that everyone can say that. I'm 59, so that was a whole different generation. But he was a very kind man, and just one of the best humans I've ever met. So left me with such a great heritage and incredible influence in my life, and constantly encouraged me. I can't feel like I was ever shamed. It was just really blessed.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, if you're planning to spend some additional time around Ken, you'll get an adequate dosage of shame. Don't you worry about that. That'll be served on the dinner plate.
Wow. Wow.
And then with Jim Rohn, I grew up in a small town. I never went to college. Small town of 11,000 people, Vernon, Texas.
Oh, and up there, Chillicothe.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on with it.
I had relatives in Chillicothe. So I grew up in a small town, never went to college, got in trouble, the whole thing. And at age 26, I moved to Dallas. At age 19, I did have a big shift. I started my first business and, did pretty good in a small town, eventually moved to Dallas totally by accident. I got in the seminar business after a couple of years after being in Dallas, went to an event. I was out of a job. The guy offered me a job. And within a couple of months, I was working for him, which meant 100 cold calls a day to book myself to go speak at a couple of companies, to then sell tickets for a seminar. And that led me over the next 2 or 3 years to eventually going out on my own, going into a city every 70, 80 days, getting 2,000 people, 2,500 people in a room. And I would hire Jim Rohn and hire Brian Tracy and Og Mandino to come speak. And we're talking 1992, 93. And then in 1993, Jim Rohn, who I thought he was by far my favorite speaker, Brian Tracy right there as well. But Jim Rohn definitely impacted me, and I'll talk about that. But I had the opportunity to make him an offer, and I launched Jim Rohn International, and it was actually my company. And because his partnerships had not worked out, I said, listen, I'll pay for everything. It'll be mine, and I'll pay you off the top. So that way you don't have to worry about it being profitable. And that first year took him from 20 speaking dates at 4,000 to eventually 110 dates at 10,000 that first year, and then started creating products, and the race was on. And then started working with other people, Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley, Les Brown. And when I met Jim, when I first heard Jim, I was promoting these two other guys, and someone gave me a Jim Rohn cassette tape. And I realized the two guys I was promoting when I first got the job had actually worked for Jim Rohn back in the Tony Robbins days. And so many, Don Hobbs, so many amazing people from back during that time period. And Jim Rohn had so many Jim Rohnisms. In fact, the first product I created was the Treasury of Quotes. which had 365 Jim Rohn quotes in it that he didn't even know he had. I pulled these from his seminars, right?
Wow.
And eventually created a little quote book that we moved 6 million of. It was a viral tool. I did them for Zig and Brian and Mark Victor Hansen. But Jim Rohn was he could take the most complex stuff and make it sound simple. He could do it in a humorous way. And some of the Jim Rohnisms that really impacted me, and they're all very simple, but it clicked at the right time. And one was, he said, the major key to your better future is you. That sounds pretty simple, but he said, it's not the government, it's not the president, it's not the economy. I mean, what an appropriate message for right now. It's not your boss, it's not your company. The major determining factor in the next 10 years of your life is you. What happens to us all. It's what you do about what happens. And although I thought I knew that, I really got it. I think I used to be kind of into politics. I let that go. I stayed, still a sports fan, but I let go of the living and dying by how my team did. And I really started focusing on my future. And that's when I became a student. That's when I read Think and Grow Rich and started reading all the books and really took it serious, started keeping a journal, started setting goals. So that was a big one. And, so many other lessons. I'll share a couple more. He said that success is predictable and that it's like a blueprint. And if you go do the right things, you're going to get the right result. And it's like having a garden. If you plant tomatoes, you're going to get tomato plants, right? And eventually tomatoes. If you want a vineyard, you're going to have to plant it and cultivate it. And if you do all the right things, water it, eventually you're going to have a vineyard. And today, when I see people constantly trying to take shortcuts, trying to, do it quick, the get rich quick schemes, it's really a lack of faith in the process. If they truly knew, if you do the right stuff, eventually you will get a harvest. And I bought into it. I bought in, wow, if I'll really do these things, I will get a result. And that was powerful. And another one that probably was one of the biggest, he said, to be successful, you have to learn to bring value to the marketplace. He said, to be wealthy, learn to bring value to valuable people. And, he said, he didn't say become a good networker. He said, but learn to bring value. And I figured out, okay, if I can put on big events, now I can invite people I want onto the stage. If I can go build a list, I ended up building a 1 million+ list, probably the first marketer that did that. And then I had, everyone coming at me. And so I learned the best way to have any relationships to bring value. How can you lead with value? And so it was a simple shortcut. And that happens to me all the time. I was telling Ken this. People will approach me, hey, do you want to meet this person? And if I don't think I can bring value, I'll say, I'm not ready to meet that person. If I have some way I can be helpful, sure. But some relationships I'm not ready to meet yet, right? And so that was powerful.
Wow.
It sounds like you put a lot of focus on letting go of things you couldn't control anyway, which is really smart.
Yeah. And back then, I don't know how much of it was letting go or just focusing on what I could control.
Kind of one of the things that fascinates me today with today's audiences is that some folks don't know who Jim Rohn is, which is absolutely stunning to me. And so the first thing I always say is Tony Robbins' mentor, but he in a way, I hate using that as well, because he's so much more than that. He is not defined by, I don't know if you can see it or not, but this is my Audible account, and these are the Jim Rohn, what I have on Audible. I listen to Jim Rohn every day. And thanks to you, Kyle, for that. I mean, I only met him one time, but it was that which is easy to do is also easy not to do, is the one that that I keep coming back to, which is why most people don't do it. For someone who is unfamiliar to this point with Jim Rohn, could you kind of give us an entry level on who he was and what you've talked about what made him so unique, but who was Jim Rohn and why did he find such resonance with so many people?
Yeah. So Jim Rohn he was a business guy, right? And he had success in business, but he was a philosopher, a true philosopher. And Scott, you're in the speaking business, right? And you realize how much of speaking is about marketing. Well, Jim Rohn was a pure philosopher, like Alan Watts, like Stephen Covey. And so that's why we had such a great marriage, because I was the marketing side. But yeah, he just knew how to take complex things and put it in a simple way. And Ken was saying it so when I was on Ken's show this past week, which was awesome. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks for being on.
That was a great show too, Kyle. Wonderful show.
No,
hey, I gotta tell you, let me interrupt you, because Glenn said, dude, I watched the entire show. I didn't even hit fast forward to skip anything. I watched all of it. And I
watched so much of it that at one point I thought, do I even have a life? Because Ken was the one who told me a lot of people will only watch social media like for 3 minutes and then they're out of here. And I looked down and it's an hour and 22 minutes in and I'm still mesmerized. That's why I said it was a really, really good show loaded with a lot of helpful content.
No, thank you. Ken said, hey, it's too bad most of these millennials don't know Jim. And I'm like, they actually do. I'm hearing it all the time. And the reason is, in my opinion, Tony Robbins, you go to a 3-day Tony Robbins event. I mean, he might reference these big people he coaches, and there's always a story related to Tony. The only person he talks about as a mentor is Jim, and he mentions Jim 20 times. Eric Worre, who's one of the biggest guys in network marketing, Jim Rohn. Robert Helms in real estate, Hal Elrod, Darren Hardy, who I just had on my podcast. When I've been interviewing Les Brown, Brian Tracy, Dennis, Darren, we devote a good 15 minutes to every podcast talking about Jim Rohn's influence in their life. So when you have those kind of students, Jim used to tell me, I want to be the guy that impacts the few that impact the many. And he truly did that. So back when I was promoting him, Scott, no one did know of him. They really did not. I would go into companies and I'm talking Earl Nightingale and Tony Robbins, whatever I could get my hook in to then talk about Jim Rohn. But because of YouTube, because of all the people he's influenced and their success, I think he's bigger than he's ever been. And I have so many interesting 25-year-old, 27-year-old, 30-year-olds that I meet that have become huge Jim Rohn fans.
Kyle, did you ever come across Tony Boyle at Nightingale Conant? Does that name ring a bell at all? I'm sorry.
I worked, with most of the people at Nightingale. I don't think I knew Tony.
Tony, female, was independent producer that produced a lot of the programs at Nightingale Conant, and we were exchanging messages today, and she's a wonderful, wonderful person. And it's always really interesting. She always has these great stories about the speakers that she's worked with, Wayne Dyer, on and on and on. But of all of them, the ones she always says, what a gentleman.
Yes.
Is Jim Rohn. Yeah, she just, there's funny stories about everybody, Tony and Wayne Dyer and Waitley and on and on, Brian. But her line always about Jim Rohn is what a gentleman. And that says so much.
No, truly. He really was the same guy off stage as he was on stage. He's very unpretentious. I remember I was doing some pretty big events. We'd do the big 3-day event, Hollywood Film Crew, cut the lights off, and I'm playing Van Halen right here, right now. And, and he would be in the back standing by me, and I'd be so excited. I got chill bumps, and he's like, is this necessary? Do we really need to do this, Kyle? And he hated all that, right? But I was trying to create a product, right? So I was doing lots of things for ulterior reasons other than just putting on an event. But he liked to keep it simple. True story, I worked for about 1.5 years to get a book publishing deal with Jan Miller, who was Stephen Covey and Tony Robbins' agent. And everything she did was with Simon & Schuster. And I'm talking 97, 98. And she did not know who Jim Rohn was. Tony didn't necessarily talk about Jim as much back then. And I finally got it done. 3-book deal, $1 million, 97. And he turned it down. And I kid you not. And I have a lot of those Jim Rohn stories. And I know it's hard to comprehend, but he was so into privacy. And, you know, I have a lot of stories of stuff I created. I didn't ask his permission. Like, he found out about it afterwards and he thanked me later. But it was this tension we had between, you know, and I think I always did a really good job promoting Jim in a pristine way. I didn't cross the line, and I created multiple email lists. So that way the Jim Rohn one was different than the Your Success Store and some of those. But it was, he was definitely a humble guy. And he would tell me fortune over fame. And I'm like, Jim, it's hard to make the fortune without the fame if you're a speaker. So it was interesting, but it was great. And that allowed me actually to start Your Success Story, where I could promote Brian and Gittimer and Mark Victor Hansen and Les Brown. And because I'd sell everyone Jim's stuff and he didn't want to create more stuff. So now I was creating stuff for them as well. So it was actually a win-win-win all the way around.
Kyle, you know, what's interesting is that once a human being decides to go ahead and celebrate the event that they are and the event that they were created to be in the world, that decision, once you include being photographed and or recorded, allows generations to enjoy you posthumously, which is really a beautiful, beautiful thing. You know, I was a huge fan of the Three Stooges. I'm sure all of us were kind of keen on that growing up. I'm only 2 years older than you are. And
I've never heard of it.
Okay, I won't include you in this discussion, Ken. But those of us who remember the Three Stooges, you know, Curly was the favorite Stooge for most people, not all. I was a big Larry fan, but people in general were always crazy about Curly. And I've explored the Three Stooges' lives in detail and gotten to know a lot about how the group was formed and so forth. Anyway, the reason I bring this up, I have visited well over 100 times, and this is not Monroe's. It's kind of beautiful. Their gravesite, and specifically Curly's, more than any of them. And I have thanked him so many times for impacting my childhood in such a favorable way that brought me so many smiles. And yet Curly and I never had an overlap on this planet. He was in the ground 2 years before my arrival. And it just shows you the power of being willing to not remain a secret. So the fact that he was willing to go public with who it is he was is the reason I was able to laugh throughout my life, despite the fact that he was dead before I was born. And I really, really love that.
Oh, well said.
I have a question. And I know, you know, it's hard to, it's probably not. What would Jim Rohn say, Kyle, in your opinion? What would he say about everything going on right now? Because we are in a very weird, tumultuous kind of place. What do you think he would say?
Yeah, I think he would say, this is not new. This is, you know, I have this inner circle and we do calls. And one time I did, here's what Jim Rohn would say. Here's what Dennis Waitley just said. And it's, you know, there was World War I and World War II and the Great Depression. Oh my God. You know, if you've ever heard people talk about that, you know, there's a series of events. Jim Rohn said life is opportunity mixed with difficulty. That's the way it's always been. It's not going to change, right?
Yeah.
And so this is unique. He would say, okay, this is unique. But again, it's no different when times are great. When they're difficult, the number one goal is try and be your best self, try and learn, try and grow, try and do all the right things. And that's all you can do, right? And so I don't know, from your vantage points, you might see it differently, but I see we've had probably far worse difficulties. I mean, I can't imagine World War I, having a family and then having to go fight a war, and there's communications very difficult. You write a letter, you hear back 4 weeks. You know, families that lost every male in the house to go fight a war. I can't imagine those things, right?
And an influenza pandemic.
Yes.
Back here while it's going
on.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, it's 25 after. It is time for that part of our show that we call, Ooh, That's Just Wrong. So what is something that you have seen that makes you go, ooh, that's just wrong?
We're looking
Ken,
for
you
audience
wanna start this week?
participation here, right?
This is where we really value audience chime-ins. And Kyle,
Yeah.
please know that our guests are not allowed to sit back and observe. We want to know what you think is just plain wrong.
I think people using the current situation politically motivated one side or the other. And it's almost, it's difficult to watch. And fortunately, I don't feel like I have that many Facebook friends that are slanted that way so far to one side or the other that they can't see the coin on the side. But when I do see it, it's hard to take. That's wrong.
Years ago, I introduced a celebrity friend, and I'll stay away from the names because I don't believe in name dropping. In fact, I tell you who taught me not to name drop was Robert De Niro.
We knew that was coming, Kyle.
Like that one?
And it works every time.
Hey, Glenn, I gotta jump in on that.
Yeah.
Because when I talk about social proof, and I'm like, you got to tell your social proof, and people will say, there's these, and I won't name names, marketers that say, no, you got to talk exactly about what the people want, leave out the social proof. So they say, so here's what you need, da, 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 and then they get slowly into, so when Oprah had me on talking about my New York Times bestselling book,
Nice.
but before that they said, listen, don't talk about yourself, talk about what people need. So anyway.
Nicely done. Years ago, I did back-to-back for a big company. And the second time around, I'd done a really humorous presentation the first time around. So when I came back, I opened with this. I looked at the crowds, about 700 people. I looked at them and said, I've been in kind of a reflective modality. And I, last night, stayed up and looked at last year's presentation on tape. And it occurred to me, and I was looking at it objectively, that I came across as being somewhat condescending. And then I looked at everyone and went, oh, I'm sorry. That's when you talk down to someone. Okay, so here's one that I think is, ooh, that's just wrong. So again, I'll stay away from names, but at an event that I was attending, I brought a celebrity friend of mine and introduced them to the host. And the host wanted to jump on it and take advantage of the fact that they were there and bring them up on stage because they were just with me, hanging out. And it wasn't even 5 minutes later, not an ounce of embellishment here, wasn't even 5 minutes later that they were brought to the stage and introduced by the host. Again, I will stay away from names, but the host introduced them, and now welcome to the stage, one of my dearest friends.
Oh.
And then said their name. If I had had, you know how the airlines will furnish a vomit bag? If I had had one with me, I would have used it that day. And I have to say, ooh, that's just wrong.
And I suspect, Glenn, I would know potentially who that host was. If
You
it was a public seminar.
know both people involved.
Yeah.
Wow.
What are our folks saying? Are they telling us some things are wrong?
But Glenn, the great part of that is it's great opportunities when people do stuff like that to say, okay, I think I'll step away, back off that relationship a little bit, right?
Which, by the way, is exactly, so you and I are kindred spirits in that regard. Here's what I don't do. I don't go to war with them. Yeah. I don't try to explain the inappropriateness of it. I view it as simply this. Thank you for sharing with me who it is you are.
Yep.
And that's it. And then I'm done with that because I don't know how you could have the gall. And frankly, Gall Magazine phoned them a day later to ask if they would be this month's cover on Gall Magazine. But when someone does that, how do you introduce someone as your best friend when you don't know their siblings? You don't know their middle name. You don't know if they're single, married, gay. Right. You don't know their political. You don't know anything about who it is they are or what it is they stand for in the world. but you won't shy away from introducing them as your best friend.
And I suspect they were a little bit oblivious themselves because they don't have a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, those people are never self-aware. I'm just playing with the idea of, I'm so surprised there's not Jackass magazine, and I have some candidates for the cover of that thing. Let me tell you.
Well, I think I want my best childhood friend ever, Scott McCain.
Yes. Oh, by the way,
that's just wrong. I hate, it's a kind of a combination here. I hate when people go on someone else's Facebook page and tell the original poster with great venom how wrong they are. Now, I'm not trying to be political on either side of it, but I posted something on my page about a feeling that I had, not something super strong, but I mean, questioning the protesters, was that really thinking of all of us and all of our health? And there were a couple people that got on, and I mean, it was vitriol. Hey, it's my page. If you want to post what you think like that, go on your page and post it. Right. And the second thing is, the part that is with that is when somebody tries to hijack a conversation on Facebook. Kyle, I'm sure you see this all the time. You might post a Jim Rohn quote, and there are people, and many of them in the speaking profession, that will then go on and say, he was such a great inspiration to me. And if you want to see how he inspired me, buy my books and buy my program, and try to hijack the conversation. And that's just wrong.
And let me play off that. That's so true. How about when same post and someone sees that, oh, I've got an event coming up, or I've got something coming up, an opportunity. They don't like your post. They don't comment on the post. They immediately text you, hey, can I speak at your event?
It's your event.
I have a couple of those people. They never like a post. Yeah. They never comment on a post, but they're constantly trolling every post.
What, the book?
Like they know everything that's going on. It's like, come on.
And that's a perfect segue into my so
your thing that's just wrong.
It's way wrong. So I recently, within the last few months, was teaching somebody a lot of technical stuff. That's what I do. And I taught them everything they know, but I didn't teach them everything that I know, right? And then I find out that they're literally creating a course teaching this. I'm like, what? Like you don't have enough gas in the tank for that, man. That's not going to work out. But I just thought, man, that's just wrong. Like, what are you doing, man?
And
like,
you told me that story, Ken. That could be one and the same person that Glenn's referencing.
It could be. You never know. And I gotta say, the gas. I just came back from Philadelphia yesterday, got a couple of new cars, and gas in Pennsylvania. I had to drive all the way across the state. Obviously, gas in Pennsylvania was like $2.20-30 or something, and we get to Ohio and it was $1.09. I'm like, literally across the state line. I'm like, what in God's name just happened to gas in those 5 minutes? That like it came down $1 and some change. I'm like, what happened? I don't know, man. I think we could be a little more even keeled across those lines. But yeah, anyway, the primary thing is, man, don't try to steal somebody else's stuff. That it's just wrong.
Did anyone else chime in tonight, audience wise? And by the way, Ken, we need to acknowledge, I'm throwing in that the vote that we acknowledge Ernest Odell, because Ernest has said some really cool things. And while Kyle was sharing, he was talking about Jim and some quotes from Jim. And I just want to acknowledge Ernest, because Ernest is with us every Sunday evening.
Ernest is amazing. He's a good
dude.
dude.
He lives in Texas, so that makes him just that much more special.
Yeah, and where is? I think all of us know Ben, don't we?
Oh gosh, yes.
Ben Gay the third.
Hey Ben.
Glenn, do you know Ben?
I do not, but I've seen his posts during our show, so I know that he is a committed viewer. And thank you, Ben.
He's a legend, man. Like He is a legend. There's Ernest. I'm trying to find one of his because I'd love to put it up. But anybody else have something that's just wrong to them that they'd like to throw out there? And
Hey, Ken, while they're popping it up, I want to say Ben Gay the third wrote the Sales Closers, and I think it was 1988, 87, 88. I'm getting in the seminar business. I read Think and Grow Rich. That's one of the other books I read. Powerful book.
wow.
So
Yeah, he worked.
He is a legend.
He is. He worked with Zig Ziglar and he worked with Napoleon Hill. I don't know if he worked for them or they worked for him, but it was something like that. I know that. He's a legend. He was on the show. I don't remember everything, but I can't find. I'm scrolling. I'm scrolling too fast.
Ernest put a comment up about one of Jim's central quotes that he said. I think he said he built his business.
Here it is.
That quote.
This is one of my favorite quotes.
If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. Yeah,
That's a powerful one.
That's only entirely true. That's all that is.
Yeah, that is. That is. So, yeah. So what? Okay. Are we moving on from this segment?
Let's move on from this segment, but later on, by the way, Kyle, just a heads up, our next segment is the best thing I saw this week. So
Cool.
that way you could be a little more prepared for that.
I was going to say, when you guys do the show, I know you don't prepare, but you probably put a lot of thought into that's just wrong. I think you guys have already thought about that one, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we didn't.
Very good. That's off the cuff.
Truly, when he mentioned it, it's off the cuff.
Nice.
I didn't give any thought at all this week, though every week plenty of people give me an opportunity to to gather new material. But I wanted to ask you, Kyle, on the subject of Jim. Who were Jim's mentors?
Yeah, he had two in particular. Earl Schoaf, who was his early teacher. Like he talks about meeting Schoaf at age 26. He was broke. A lot of the things Jim talks about, he says are things that Schoaf taught him. And of course, Jim made it his own. And by age 31, he was a millionaire. So that was one big influence. Wow. Earl Schoaf died at age 49. And so I think Jim was with him 6-7 years. And the other was William E. Bailey, Bill Bailey. And I think I told the story on Ken's interview that I did this tribute video for Jim before he passed away. And we sat down and watched it a month before he passed away. And I had Zig, Brian, Tony, Rock, everyone, right? Jim's best friends, his people he worked with. The one guy that couldn't make it to Dallas or LA for the filming was Bill Bailey. So I flew to Lexington, drove an hour out in the western part of Kentucky, and we spent the day together at his family log cabin so I could get, 2 minutes of Bill talking about the impact of Jim Rohn. Because I'm like, I can't deliver this video to Jim without having Bill Bailey. And I published one of his books. I promoted Bill, some amazing human beings. So a lot of Jim's quotes you will find through some of the books he recommends, How to Read a Book, and again, Think and Grow Rich, and Bill Bailey and Schoaf. And I was recently on a podcast with a gentleman, you guys would know who he is, and he was asking me some of the lessons I learned from Jim, and I shared some, and he said, oh my goodness, those 3 things you just shared, I thought were my ideas. I have those as the 3 core ideas of the book I wrote, and he's a huge Jim Rohn fan. And I said, hey, don't feel bad, because I think what happens, that happens to me too. I have an idea, an epiphany, and I think that's mine. And I realized, oh, Jim said that. I just never really heard it before. And I think what happens is when we hear it, we're taught, back to mentors, we've been given so much, but when we actually take it, make it our own, take action, go through the tunnel, come out the other side, it's now ours. And what happens is I think we have energy that impacts other people. I can impact new people that Jim never impacted by the very lessons he taught me if I've actually gone through them. Now, if I've not gone through them, it doesn't have that, that transformational aspect of it. But, I think with Jim, he did have mentors that he did quote, but it's after he made it his own. It really was the essence of who he was.
So will you join me in a game of yes and?
Sure.
Okay, thank you for saying yes. So yes, and I completely agree with that and get it. And I want to add an additional thought, which is a little bit of a mind-bending thought, but I know you guys will relate to what I'm about to say, which is this. Yes, there are times for sure that we are impacted with things and then we think we've come up with them on our own when in fact we heard them said years ago or we read them in a book 30 years ago. That's true. Here is what is also true. What is also true is that we live in a cosmos that is infinitely wise. And what I maintain is true is that there is a bandwidth of information and it is always busy broadcasting. And I've been teaching this stuff for years. And so what happens is quite often great minds will dial in on that same frequency. And so what will happen is a Ken Walls or a Scott McCain or a Kyle Wilson or a Glenn Morshower can hear the exact same broadcast that Jim heard. And they didn't hear it from Jim. They actually heard it from the cosmos because their level of receptivity was so elevated, they were dialed in, and it is no different than listening to a radio station. When you tune into what they play on 98.6, you're going to get that frequency. And I believe that we are always being spoken to, and the attentive people hear it.
Yes.
That makes sense?
1,000%.
This is how it works, Glenn. This is the way the energy works. I wrote down as Kyle was talking what I wanted to talk about or a little part I wanted to say, and you literally just said it. In my book, I wrote in the beginning of my book, I said, if I quote anyone and I know exactly who it was that said what I quoted, I'm going to give them credit, but I also am going to quote things that I have no idea, and I'll just put unknown, and please send me an email. Let me know who that was if you read it. And I said, one of my favorite quotes is, there is no such thing as an original thought. All wisdom is plagiarized.
I said that, Ken. That's fine.
See, I should have put Scott McCain. But
right.
It says there's no such thing as an original thought. All wisdom is plagiarized. Only stupidity is original. And I have no idea who said that, but I've heard that. And Einstein said everything is energy in motion. And Dr. Wayne Dyer wrote in his books, he talked about that, the 100th monkey syndrome and some other things where all of these thoughts, everything's out there available for us. And a lot of people call it a God download or whatever you want to call it, but you're getting this information. It's constantly hitting you. And the difference that I've found is those shower moments where you have the aha, like, oh my God, I have an idea.
Right.
We've all had those, right? The difference between successful people and people that may never experience high levels is most successful people have those and then they take action immediately.
Sure, because that's following one's whisper. And, all the folks that I spend any kind of extended time with, what they all have in common is that a regular part of our daily diet is that we are always volunteering to be the vessel for the thought that is looking to express.
Yeah.
Always thoughts that want to express, feelings that want to express, not impress, but express. And our job is to volunteer for those when we hear them and say, listen, I'm honored. I'm truly honored to be chosen to be a vessel for the expression of this feeling or this idea. It's a beautiful thing. Hey, can we go around, because we haven't spoken yet about who our mentors were.
Yes.
And I think that the audience would probably like to know. Scott, who, and by the way, I'm done referring to you as a guy named Scott. We're at week number 3. So you're officially Scott. But who has mentored you? Who helped you carve the design that we currently see today?
I appreciate it, Glenn. And by the way, Kyle, they tried to lobby me to name, so it would be Ken, Glenn, and Stan.
We lost you there, Scott. You broke up.
Sorry. Am I back?
I think so.
Yeah. I suspect it was your attempt to demonstrate some sort of increased self-esteem, and the internet just shut it down. It just wasn't going to happen.
Well, I talked a little bit about him on our first show, but my mentor from Texas, as two of you guys are, was a guy named Grady Nutt, and Grady was a Christian humorist who had been a minister who got into the world of public speaking, and just through a coincidence, he heard me when I was a national officer of FFA, and he was the keynote speaker for this convention we're doing for like 5,000 people in Illinois. And he heard me speak at age 19. And after the speech, I met him to tell him how much I just was blown away by his presentation. And he said words that changed my life. He said, "You ought to be doing this for a living, and I'm going to help." And he had started a speakers bureau with his agent, and they booked me for my first professional speech. And the best thing about Grady, and I've told this before, so apologize if for those who've heard it before, but I wanted to be Grady. I loved his material. I loved his style. I loved everything about what he did. He, to this day, and he unfortunately was killed in a plane crash. My first wife and I eventually lost to cancer, but she and I were married in Grady's living room. I mean, we were literally married at the nut house. and he was such an important part of my life. We were so close, but he took me to lunch, and he said, "Scott, I'm sincerely moved by how much that you obviously have appreciated the mentorship that I've tried to bring. But," he said, "as long as you're trying to be the next Grady Nutt, the best you can hope for is second place." He said, "I have a corner on the Grady Nutt market." But he said, "You could be the best Scott McCain that the world has seen." And that was a moment that really, really was life-changing. So I give thanks every day that Grady crossed my path. And even through his passing, that's why I got involved in the National Speakers Association, and, got in Speakers Roundtable with people like Brian Tracy and Ken Blanchard and other folks like that. And so in every way, he was a mentor. He was a friend. He was someone who set such an incredibly high standard. I continue to this day, after so many years in the business, to try to live up to that standard.
And what's beautiful is that we are the beneficiaries of that relationship, because we see his influence upon your soul. And that's incredible. Hey,
well, and I think of the Earl Schoaf, Jim Rohn. Earl Schoaf passes away at such a young age, but yet the impact that his mentorship had. I mean, look at all the people that Tony Robbins has touched, and that others have touched, that are direct descendants of the mentorship of young Earl Schoaf. It's just amazing what can happen when we provide mentorship to people that are ready for it and are deserving of the attention.
So I'm sure you've had several. Would Grady be the biggest one in your life?
Grady's the biggest. There's another guy, Charlie Willie. Charlie was he was a cantankerous guy. He was one of the first that was just out all the time, and he had this great story. Jim Rohn and Charlie trip, and this, you just did puddle jumpers to all the small towns in Australia. Any of them, Jim or Zig had really, really hit it big, and he'd love telling the story of Zig was exhausted. Zig fell asleep. Him and Charlie got the plane and left Zig on the plane, and it's one town later on this little puddle, and Zig had to wait and take all the way back. And so Charlie was just an amazing influence as well. And I've been very fortunate in that a lot of the people that have been mentors have also become friends. I mean, I lived in Del Mar, and Brian Tracy is there in Solana Beach, and I used to go have dinner with Brian and Barbara a lot, and just so many things that I've had the privilege of and I've told the story here about, having dinner with Zig and what Zig did for me after my wife passed away. I mean, just so many of these incredible, incredible people. And I say that, and I say that not to name drop, but I say it because I want people to know they were that kind of person, that they cared enough to help somebody that the world would never, it would not have made a bit of difference that Grady Nutt took the time to help me. I mean, none of the people that followed him would have ever known if he had not, or if Zig wouldn't have, left a note when we checked in the hotel and asked my wife and me to dinner.
I love that story.
No one would have ever known. But
Yeah.
I say that not to. I say that because it's really important to me that people know what kind of people that they really, really were.
Yeah.
So who influenced your soft clay version of you, Ken?
Soft.
That's a great way to put it. I love that. That's a great way to put
We
it.
arrive impressionable in this world, and I think if we're healthy, we remain impressionable. The last thing we want to do is place ourselves into some sort of emotional or spiritual kiln and become hardened where we're not impressionable or malleable anymore. So what artists left their mark on you?
I didn't graduate high school. I think all of you know that. And I walked out in 12th grade when they insisted I go back and get a biology credit. And I'm like, why would I ever need biology? I'm not dissecting a frog ever in my life. So like, I ended up eventually, after working at the Honda factory for a couple of years, I got into sales. And that's when I discovered Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn, obviously, along the way. When I really needed some motivation, I needed to get out of that feeling sorry for myself state. But I gotta tell you, like, if I sat here and said Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, they're all the ones that, because I wore out their cassette tapes and, I would copy them. I got really good at making copies, even the protected ones. Technology's always been my thing. So I figured a way how to hack around it and copy them anyway. And just so I could have extras because I wore them out. But it didn't matter what I listened to. If I got into the mode of poor me or feeling sorry for myself or feeling lazy or whatever, there was one gentleman, and I wrote about this guy in my book. His name was Dan Fink, and he was a sales manager of mine. I was an independent contractor for a company I was selling for, and I had made some pretty decent money. And then I don't know if you guys have ever had this happen where you're like, maybe you got a little bit of money in the bank and you're like, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not going to make any cold calls. I'm not going to go try to do anything. I'm just kind of stuck. I was frozen in this place. And I was sitting in now I was smoking cigarettes back in that day. And I was sitting there one morning. This guy had been leaving me messages on my answering machine. Remember the old answering machines where you could hear them leaving a message in the other room? And so he's leaving me messages. Why aren't you calling me? Why aren't you calling me? He lived 70 miles from me. I'm sitting there one morning, smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, playing Super Mario Brothers. And I was like 20 years old or 20, I don't know, 21 maybe. And my hair's standing up like Don King. And I'm like, I hear somebody pulling into our gravel driveway. And I'm like, who in the heck's pulling into the driveway? It's like 10 a.m. And I look out the window and I made eye contact with this guy, Dan Fink, my manager. And I was like, oh, crap. And I hit the floor and I'm crawling. And he wasn't a big dude. I was just terrified of him, right? He was my manager. And I'm hiding. I'm like, I don't want to face this guy. Like, I haven't returned his calls for a week. And so he's pulling in, he's banging on the door. I know you're in there. Open up the freaking door now. And he didn't say freaking, but and I'm like, oh God, I finally open up the door. He's like, what the hell are you doing? I go, oh, I'm just not feeling it. And I don't know. I started coming up with all these excuses. And he goes, go get your ass in the shower right now, put your suit and tie on. We're going out cold calling. And I'm like, no, we're not. And he goes, yes, we are. And he made me go get ready. And I'll never forget that ever, 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 because he took me out that day and forced me. And I did not want to. And I probably could have beat him up had I really gotten into it with him, but I didn't. I just said, okay, I'm going to respect this guy. I'm going to go do it. This is a guy making 300 grand a year or so. 30 years ago, he was doing pretty well. And I'm like, I follow this guy out. And he changed my life that day because he taught me and he probably brought up Jim Rohn. He probably brought up, because he knew all the quotes, he probably brought up Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and everything. And I didn't hear it, but I heard it and I felt it. It was more of a, hands-on thing where he forced me out of my home and out of my head and into just taking action and not get any, it turned into a several $1,000 day for me as a result. And so from my perspective, all of the motivation in the world, all of the Jim Rohn programs and the Scott McCain programs and the Glenn Morshower and the Kyle Wilsons and Zig Ziglar, all of that does not matter if you don't take action. And that was the moment that absolutely changed everything for me, because I realized, man, you don't have to be perfect. In fact, you're probably not going to be perfect. Just go take the freaking action. And that changed me that day. I'll never forget it. So that was my mentor, a guy nobody's heard of, but his name is Dan Fink. Dan Fink got me out of my funk.
Well, I want to share actually several, but I won't be able to tell you stories about each one because of the time constraints. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. My birth father, Alan Bennett, left me the gift of truly modeling for me, and not just via words, but actions. He showed and demonstrated on a regular basis what it means to unconditionally love. My stepfather, Harry Morshower, whose name I carry, gave me the gift of presence, how to enter a room and alter that room. I watched him do it. He never once sat down and discussed how it was done. I simply watched how his energy moved, and it's because he absolutely and unequivocally knew who it was he was, and he simply shared his energy. Jack Lemmon was my mentor and hero. Growing up, I idolized him and then had the privilege of working together with Jack, where I heard him say the expression, "It's magic time," which he was known for in life and through all of his projects. Right before the camera would roll, Jack would just under his breath say, "It's magic time." And we narrated a film for HBO together. I do a lot of voiceover work like you do, Scott. And we were hired to narrate this film back when HBO was in its infancy. And the voices for this movie that were there that day in the studio were Carl Malden, Ed Asner, and Jack Lemmon, and me. And I just thought, man, we have saying here in Texas, this fella, you're peeing in tall cotton now. And that was an extraordinary thing. And then there was my rabbi, which I always found it funny as hell that a rabbi could sound like this. And he's like, hey, boys, y'all straighten up. We're over here trying to have a bar mitzvah. And I just thought that was
over here.
The two biggest spiritual influences of my life. God rest their souls. Both are deceased now, but Russell Friedman, who taught me the 5 most important words. And I have been carrying the torch on Russell's behalf. He is the one who taught me the expression, "That's old, I'm new, goodbye." And if you've never heard those words, guys, the "that's old" references a previous version of you and a habit you're ready to part with. And Russell taught us that you could stare right at that habit. And he said, actually act it out, turn to it, look at it and say, "That's old." Then move away from it by a step or two, look forward and declare the truth, which is, "I'm new," followed by, from that new vantage point, turning back to it and saying goodbye. So again, the teaching is, that's old, I'm new, goodbye. And the closing one for me, I told you I would consolidate this very fast, is a woman named Adele Gerard Tinning, who wrote a book called God's Way of Life. And I read it when I was in my mid-20s. It was a book that was published but was never intended to be for sale. The way you would obtain this book is someone would hand it to you that loved you. That was the criteria. If somebody loved you and felt you were ready to receive its gifts, they would spot that and hand you a copy. I read this book. It's a matter of probably 4 or 5 hours to read the whole thing. And I got to the end of it and had to. It was non-negotiable. I had to speak with its author, and immediately would be the correct way to do that. So I called directory assistance. Now, back in those days, we're all old enough to remember 1-800, and you would insert the local area code 555-1212, and you would call long distance, not even an expression used in today's world.
Right.
You would call long distance to get the number, and I called 1619, which was San Diego area code, to just ask on a hunch, because I had to speak with Adele. Do you guys know if there's a listing for Adele Tinning? And indeed, she was in the book, and honestly, not 3 minutes after. And that's what action does. That's what being proactive does. Not 3 minutes after I finished reading this book with tears streaming down my face, I hear this little old lady answer the phone, and she goes, "Hello." And I said, "Yes, is this Adele?" She goes, "It is, honey. Who is this?" And I told her who it was. And I said, "I just put your book down. It's the most powerful book I've ever read. And I wanted to thank you for agreeing to be this information's vessel." She said, "Honey, what are you doing on Wednesday night? I want to invite you down here to a little love rally." And I went, "Well, okay." And I drove down there, attended her rally. She was 83 years old. And I spent much time with her for the last 3 months of her life. Wow. And she really served as someone who was modeling love incarnate and greatly influenced me. I'm just grateful for all the mentors that have shown up in my life. And frankly, you three gentlemen are leaving your mark in a beautiful way. So thank you for agreeing to be the vessel of the things that you guys present.
And you as well, Glenn, and the chance not only to speak to the class that you have there, but to observe, what they have gained and how they are growing because of you was really impactful for me this week. So I see the mentorship that you are bringing to so many people.
Well, thanks, buddy. We really believe that when you grow life first, that when you make that your priority, everything else seems to chiropractically fall right in place. Like that's the part of the spiritual spine that if you just adjust your alignedness with whatever it is you believe in, it's not even a religious conversation, just whatever you believe in, whatever you stand for, whatever you're made up, what fuels you. If you get connected with that, then these other things that people seem to give tremendous time and energy to worrying about, you can really live a worry-free life because your priorities have been addressed, and it's like everything else just comes along for the ride. And you know that you're in the groove because there seems to be an inherent effortlessness to living. You don't walk around feeling like you're burdened or that you're enduring life, but rather you're celebrating. And that transition from being one who endures to one who celebrates is such a joyous thing to bear witness to. And I've seen it countless numbers of times. Yeah.
Incredible.
And, to piggyback on something that Kyle mentioned too, one of the things that Jim Rohn mentions on several of his programs is that your mentor might not be someone that you meet. It might be someone that you learn of through a biography or even an autobiography or something that is there that you can model your life after a Lincoln or a Churchill or a Martin Luther King or whoever that might be. So don't think if you're watching this guy, I can understand somebody watching this thinking, my goodness, weren't those four guys fortunate to have crossed paths with so many wonderful people? I'm not in a situation where I'm going to meet somebody like that. Well, go get a good book. Read a great biography. Think about the trials and tribulations that they may have gone through. One of my two or three best pals in the world is a guy named Larry Winget, and Larry is a great New York Times bestseller and Speaker Hall of Fame member. And he had never really met Jim Rohn, but he considered Jim to be his mentor because of how much it had changed his life as he was listening to Jim. And to this day, the greatest speaker introduction I've ever heard was when Larry introduced Jim to the National Speakers Association. And you know, here's Larry's Hall of Fame speaker, and he's making tens of thousands of dollars per gig. And he walked up, and the entire introduction was, "Ladies and gentlemen, here are the best 5 words you will ever hear me say from the platform. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Rohn."
Wow.
And he sat down.
Wow.
To this day is the greatest introduction I've ever heard. He said, "The best thing you'll ever hear me say from a platform."
That's so good to know. And to your point, Scott, I've heard tens of thousands of people, you know, the last 30 years talk about Jim Rohn's impact that had never met him. And he died in 2009. So all the people today that I get to hear their story, I mean, their massive success or the massive changes, exactly as you say, right? And again, I think the book Think and Grow Rich has impacted so many people. Alan Watts is a big influence in my life. He passed away in 1978. So it's a great point.
I want to ask Scott. I want to piggyback on a thought, and this I'm gonna go ahead and risk sounding a little woo-woo foo-foo here, but this is again mind-bending stuff, and that's that you mentioned, and I wrote it down, which you guys know I do that when I'm listening. I write down key things that I think are beautiful or that are a launching point for additional conversation on a topic. And you said that these people have said, well, you know, I'll never meet someone like that, right? We were talking about people we've been blessed to meet, and someone has decided. So my question that I wrote down is, why have you decided that? Meaning those people, why have they decided already? I call it pre-decision. And I don't think anything harms lives more than being pre-decided about something. So if you walk around believing, well, I mean, that's great for you, Scott or Ken or Kyle, that you're hanging out, or Glenn, with all these interesting people, but that's not the kind of thing that happens to someone like me. And the first thing I would confront these people with is, why have you agreed to co-sign that belief? Why are you holding that in consciousness? Because the problem, it falls under the heading of what I refer to, and Scott, I know you love the expression that I've coined, which is chronic opinionitis. So your chronic opinionitis about that is the very reason it's looking that way. And that if you ever want it to change, it's about changing the belief first that is feeding that reality. And all you have to do is give up that previously held opinion. That goes back to Russell Friedman's teaching of, that's old, I'm new, goodbye. So what if you decide that that's an old opinion, which does not need to govern this version of me? And that's where the I'm new part comes in. So I'm new, and therefore, based on my newness, goodbye. Goodbye to that belief that people like me just don't run into very, very world influencer, powerful people or world influencers. I just don't want to agree that that's true. And that's why I believe in room 4. You've heard me talk about the 4 rooms of consciousness being impossibility, possibility, probability, and inevitability. That's room 4, which is inevitability. When you see your life as unfolding beautifully and perfectly and on as large a scale as you can possibly imagine, that's inevitability. So that's what came to mind when I heard you say these people that have decided that. I really invite our audience to think about how much damage your opinions are doing to you and how much limitation they are creating in your life.
Hey, Glenn.
I always, if I could chime in real quick, I was thinking about that too, Glenn, is, you know, Bob Berg, we all know Bob Berg. Bob's a buddy of mine too. And I, you know, I saw him somewhere on a podcast or video thing. And I'm like, you know what, let me just call this number at the bottom of his website or whatever it was. And cause I want to help this guy with some things. And so I called the number, and I remember thinking, why are you even trying? Like this guy's out of your league. This was years ago. But I called it anyway. And this male voice answers, hello. And I go, and if you recognize the way I just said hello, you know who answered. And I'm like, is this Bob? And he goes, it is. Who's calling? And I go, oh, this is Ken Walls. And we just got into a, nice conversation, but it's that limiting belief of I can't do that. I can't reach out. When Mark Victor Hansen gave me, Kyle, he gave me your cell phone number and he goes, here's the cell phone number, call him. And I'm like, Jim Rohn's freaking business partner. You want me to just call him? Like what? And I did. And we had a great conversation. Well, I left you a voice message and you called me right back. We had a great conversation. So I think it's a matter of that. Like, you just got to say, why not me? Like,
and I know Kyle wants to jump in on this. I'm looking at him. He looks like a Kentucky Derby.
Well, out of the gate.
I want you to repeat, Glenn, the impossibility, those 4 phrases.
Okay, this was based on a whisper.
Yeah.
Years ago, and all of the stuff I've written, all of it comes from whispers. The difference is that when I hear a whisper, I write it down, and I also do something that is a different relationship with it, which is that I actually obey them.
Yeah.
And I do not veto them for the 2 biggest reasons people veto their whispers, which is that they require that they be linear, meaning they require that they make sense. I do not require that. And a big one is they also require that it be convenient, or they won't do it. Yeah. I am more than willing to be inconvenienced by my whispers, no matter what they may ask of me. But here they are. The first one, these are levels. We could just call them, in my book, I refer to them as the 4 rooms, and they are mindsets. If you start using the expression rooms of consciousness, you tend to lose about 30 or 40% of your audience, because consciousness sounds woo-woo. But so the 4 mindsets are this. The first room is impossibility. Their theme word is no. And we've met these people. These are the ones that say, I was wondering, no. Well, what if we, no. Well, we could always, I was thinking about going into business with Ken. Maybe we could do a radio show. No. So that's the room of impossibility. Now we go up to the next rung of the ladder, and I'm doing this at lightning speed right now because of our time constraint tonight. But level 2 is possibility. Possibility. Their theme word is maybe. They are neither pro nor con. They're neither yes nor no, but they are open-minded in a way that room 1 of impossibility is not. They're saying, maybe, tell me more. It's basically the room where people say, I will listen. Room 3, if we've gone from impossibility to possibility, now, of course, we graduate to the next level, which is probability. And their theme word is likely. They do not see things as no, and they do not see them as maybe. They see them as likely. They actually are leaning forward. And the final room, which is the room that I pray and coach toward and look for the world to join me in residing in, is room 4, which is the room of inevitability. And their theme word is the opposite of room 1. Their theme word is yes. They start with yes. They work from yes. And there is no other option. So the theme there is yes, and there is no other way. They won't even get into something if it includes hope, wish, or want. They are so far up above in the stratosphere, they're not sitting around hoping for a favorable outcome. Every time I take the stage, I'll tell you what I don't do. I don't spend 1 ounce of energy hoping that it goes well. That's the God's honest truth. I know in advance that it goes well, and that it going well is a predetermined inevitability. And that mindset is readily available. It's not even a big deal. It is not far-fetched unless you hold the belief that it's far-fetched, in which case it becomes far-fetched. But if you can really know that inevitability is our right, that we can all reside in the lane of inevitability, that's the lane where miracles occur.
And would you say that's a process, like your morning routine, your meditation, your journaling? You have a goal, you have a vision, and it's not you have it once and you done. It's almost like a process of holding that vision, right?
Yes.
That's there in a congruent way. You're not just pulling something out of the air. It's something you've arrived at, but it's a process. I think that's one of the things that people trip on is they think, oh, I tried it, didn't work. I made it inevitable.
I think maybe early on it's a process, but after a while, you actually get to where you speak it fluently, right? And once you speak it fluently, what happens is it metabolizes. I mean, do you really have to think about riding a bicycle when you're riding a bicycle?
No.
I'll promise you no hockey player in the history of the game has ever once thought about skating. They don't think about skating. They think about scoring and blocking the puck. They're not out there. No one has ever walked up to a hockey player and said, you really skated well tonight, right? So it's second nature. But it takes
in the beginning, it's a bit of a practice, right?
Yes. To get to that level of proficiency, yes, indeed.
Love it. Actually, Glenn and Scott and Keith, I mean, I have so many notes. Glenn, I want to mention a couple of things else that you mentioned that were just so powerful. Talking about the muse. I'm a big, I love documentaries. I love watching interviews. Any artist I've ever seen, musical artist, they talk about just receiving, when it comes. And I talk about when you're praying or meditating or you're journaling and you get a great idea, I stop meditating and I write it down. I hope Paul McCartney, when yesterday came to Paul McCartney, I'm sure, he didn't say, well, I'll get to that tomorrow. He went ahead, wrote it down. So, part of the goal of meditating and journaling is to get the download, right? And so that, I thought that was powerful. And I love that's old, I'm new, goodbye. I have some very specific things I need to apply that to. And then you said, kind of just as if I can read my writing, for one who endures to one celebrate. Oh, dang it.
Maybe I said improve your handwriting.
I will have to go work on this one. I'll watch the replay. I was trying to look like I was looking at you and making notes, right?
Above all, Kyle, you got to be able to read your own notes, brother.
Right.
Hey, it's 6:17 or 17 after the hour, and we can't forget that we also say the best thing I saw this week. So let's not overlook doing that. So Kyle, let's start with you. What's the best thing that you saw this week?
Well, it has to be the show I was on a couple of days ago with Ken. That was pretty cool. And we had Jeffrey Gittimer pop in and Mike Muni popped in, and that was a lot of fun. And then tonight, again, total serendipity connecting with Ken. So that's been a blessing.
Wow.
Very cool. Ken?
How do I follow that? Honestly, to this right here, I'm I go back to the day I was sitting in my living room playing Super Mario Brothers many, many years ago. And I think about, like, I am sitting here with three very legendary people right now that on this show that just blows my mind. I am in a state of unbelievable gratitude right now. I really am. I can't think of anything else. That this is incredible.
Hey, Glenn, before yours, I'll jump in with mine because tonight is one of them. But your class was the best thing I saw this week, in addition to tonight. And part of it is, kind of last week we alluded to one of the things that bothered us was internet courage. Those folks that were constitutional law experts on Facebook during the impeachment trial, and now are coronavirus experts and that instant expertise, and how frustrating that is in today's culture. And to see so many people on that call who were willing to learn and then to pay their dues acting upon what they had learned was just incredibly inspiring and a bit overwhelming. And it really struck me that, we notice the people who post the idiotic crap on Facebook, but we also should understand that is this much of what's out there in the world. And to see those people, and it's not just that they were there to learn, It was they were there to learn so that they could apply their learning, apply the insights. And that was just incredibly inspiring and impressive to me. That's the best thing I saw this week.
Yeah, wow. And the best thing I saw is actually referencing that same group of people, Scott, because I have not cried, and I am a crier. You know, one of the biggest lies we were ever told, it makes my list of the 9 biggest lies, is real men don't cry. And of course, what's really interesting is that is such a belief that our creator accidentally installed tear ducts in men. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. That's such a ridiculous thought. Clearly, we are supposed to cry, and that is not a gender specific situation. But I have not cried massive happy tears. I was floored because of these 95 people that when I opened the chat room were there screaming, and then they went on to and because we don't have an exact 90-minute hard out, and I don't want to do anything that's self-indulgent and runs into many minutes, but may I please offer you gentlemen, I don't know, 2 minutes of it. This thing probably runs 25. You can look at it on your own time. It's on our webpage. But can I offer you 2 minutes of what brought me to tears? And Ken, since you're that master engineer, can you do a screen share and go to, it should be on the Extra Mile all pages, since you're a member of that. And if you'll look for it, it just
it's not the West, right?
No, it'll be on the all pages.
Oh, okay.
But I'm sure you gents have had the experience of just realizing what a privilege it is to reside in your uniquely assigned sack of skin. That my whole life, I've never wanted to be anyone other than who I am. I've never wanted anyone's life. I've never wanted their house. I've never wanted their bank account. I've never wanted their car. I've never wanted it because I was so busy celebrating the fact that I outswam 500 million sperm to express who it is I uniquely am, that I wanted to go ahead and get busy with that mission and not preoccupy myself with what someone else had envisioned for me. Let me just say one more thing about that. The thing that changed the trajectory of my life and sort of concretized my understanding and my commitment to this belief is when years ago I read this survey of 100 hospice patients who were asked what their 5 biggest regrets were. And in 97%, I'm sorry, but that's too elevated a percentage to ignore. It's just too much. You can't ignore that. In 97% of those instances, they said that their biggest regret was that they had spent the entirety of their lives living the life they thought someone else wanted them to live. But now it was too late to do anything about it because they're getting ready to check out from Hotel Earth and they're down to days at most or a week or so. And so they're not going to get any redos at this point. And so in the death day self-conversation, the last day of my life has been advising me how to live my life for many years because I dared to open up that conversation and said, teach me, Glenn, on your last day of your Earth visit, teach me what it is you will need in order to be able to feel good about your departure, because I am your solution. You are not. And that's a conversation that all of my extra milers know about how to have. Did you find it, Ken? You're muted.
Yes, I found it. Sorry, I muted myself.
Yeah, just play like the first 2 minutes of it, and it will give everyone a chance to see what left me in tears. It's just people expressing gratitude, and gratitude is a very high vibration.
This is pretty cool. So nobody send me an instant message right now.
You saw the video as well, didn't you, Ken?
I did. Yes.
Yeah. So watch and enjoy this, gentlemen.
Play that song, Sam. You know the one, the birthday song. Yeah, that's it. It's for my friend, Glenn Morshower.
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday, dear Glennie. Happy birthday to you.
Gracias, señor.
165 extra milers noticed it's Glenn Morshower's birthday, and one looked into the camera and said,
Happy birthday to you, buddy. Happy birthday to you. Let me give you a big hug. Oi, can you feel that? Can you feel that? My hand is getting lower. I'm going to touch your ass. I'm squeezing it now.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Love you and miss you.
Happy birthday, Glenn. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Have a very happy birthday, Glenn. Sending you lots of love.
Happy birthday, Glenn. I hope it's a great one.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Hope you have an awesome day, man. Hope to see you soon.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Love you. Thank you for being you.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Hope you have a blessed day.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Just wanted to wish you a very happy birthday and say thank you for everything that you do for all of us in the Extra Mile family. We love you.
Happy 22,281 day birthday, my bald-headed ginger friend. Love you.
Hey, Glenn, happy birthday. You are a rock star, my friend, and I just wish you the absolute best. Love you, man.
Hey, Glenn, I just wanted to say happy birthday to you in my best Texas accent.
Do you have any idea how much I miss you? You beautiful ginger angel Glenn. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Thank you for being the incredible soul that you are and sharing your wisdom, joy, happiness, and love with so many of us. I love you. I appreciate you. Happy birthday.
Hi, Glenn. It's Charlotte and Charlie, and we're here to wish you a happy birthday.
Brusha, brusha, brusha with the new iPad. Brusha, brusha, brusha.
It's a wrong song.
Ken, you can play about 30 more seconds.
Hey, Glenn, happy birthday. Wish you much success this next year. A lot of health, prosperity. Appreciate everything you do, all your teachings. Much love.
Dear Glenn, happy birthday. I wish you all the best in the world.
Happy birthday, Glenn.
Hey there, Glenn. Happy, beautiful birthday. Only love.
Happy birthday, Glenn.
Happy birthday, Glenn. Here's to another trip around the sun. I hope it's full of peace, joy, love, and good health.
Happy birthday, Glenn.
Hey, Glenn, it's Colleen. There's nothing petty about you. You've taught us how to free fall in our lives. You've played a general, a dad. You've been a resident in our lifetime. You've transformed us all, and happy birthday, dear friend.
Ken, that's good, bud. So it's doing its number to me again, and I love it. I'm just sitting here melting because it was 25 minutes of being bombarded by pure gratitude and love. And I don't know any other reaction than to be deeply moved by it. So that was my time of beauty. And thank you to all of my students for the love that you're committed to. Thank you.
It was awesome.
Best thing we're going to see for a long while right there. I think that is absolutely fantastic. So Kyle, a question for you. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Glenn.
I thank Kyle for cruising on down and being a part of our feeling spontaneously. We so appreciate having you on the show. I admire your tender heart, and you're really, you're with your tribe, brother. You're with your tribe.
Hey, my honor. I've loved it. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Kyle, one last question for you before we're out of here, and that is what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, I stay pretty busy. I have a inner circle mastermind that Mike Muni, people you guys would know are part of, good friends, really high caliber of people, right? And I do different book projects and have some events I do that I've had to turn virtual, right? We had a big event lined up with Ron White today in Philadelphia. We just moved virtual and keep a pretty full schedule, and have had to pivot right during this whole thing, taking all my inner circle stuff online. We meet 18 times all over the country. So taking everything online now, and it's actually been amazing, right? To find the positives in the midst of the challenges.
Yeah.
And that's part of why we're here, right? It's part of why we are here every Sunday night with great folks like you, Kyle, is to try to find the positive we certainly began during a time of pandemic, but this will continue long after this too shall pass. But that's why we're here, is to try to find that and anchor that in people's lives every Sunday night.
You know, Jim Rohn talked about trusted voices, and during challenging times, that's the most important thing. It gets so loud, it gets so noisy. Everyone has an opinion, and I think all three of you guys are trusted voices. And so that's the key, is you got to narrow your focus and find the voices that you trust, voices of experience, wisdom. And so again, it's been my honor to be part of this tonight.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
That's awesome. And thank you. I appreciate you I appreciate you, like, today, like, as an example, we were just talking about the flow, and I'm talking to Glenn on the phone about the show. Kyle texts me. Glenn says, add him to the call. And so and it's like, bam, it just, like, that's the way it works. So
that's room forward. That's inevitability. Their theme word is yes.
It was. Yeah. No, today was, just part of the flow, as you talked about, Glenn.
It's awesome. Awesome.
I think that's Ken.
I want to say thank you to all of the amazing people who've been watching. Tons and tons of people have shared this out, and so we don't have to do any public shaming.
Nancy Summers chimed in and said some really kind things throughout. Robert Brooker said a lot of beautiful things tonight. I've been going back over these.
Yeah, amazing people we have watching and supporting the show. So thank you all very, very much. I will say it would be very beneficial to everyone to go check out Kyle Wilson's website, kylewilson.com. And
wow, thank you.
And the event that you guys are going to do, I'm excited about that too.
There's still space available, Kyle, for people to get in on that event?
Well, of course, it's virtual, so they absolutely can. And when I shared about it on Ken's show, he's like, what? When I told him about it, and he actually went and signed up.
I did.
And a bunch of his people signed up. So I told Ken, I like the fish jumping in the boat. Like, I don't want to hunt at all. I like the fish.
I'm with you.
But if they can jump in the boat, so we just try and give massive value. It's not a sales fest at all, sales pitches. It's actually 2 days of massive value. We're not trying to upsell anyone anything. And it's just great value. And, kylewilson.com if they want to learn more.
And the
Thank you so much.
Again, can you remind us what the dates are?
It's May 8 and 9. And it's Ron White, the two-time U.S. memory champion, teaching people how to remember names, faces, speeches. I teach marketing, all the principles I know. I've got some amazing guests that will be part of it too. And we talk about what we list on the website, all the different things we focus on. And we truly actually do those things. We focus on it. There is no, like I said, no upsell to a high-end online program. We have a couple of things we offer, but they're actually different than what we're talking about. So
best of luck with your event, brother.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Great to see you, Kyle. Thank you.
Hey, Scott, great connecting with you. I've been a fan, so this has been awesome.
Okay. Thanks. Great. It works both ways, my friend. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
So
thanks, everybody. I think that does it for us tonight, right?
Yes, it does. And I just want to tell Kyle, don't hang up on us yet.
Okay.
We're going to do an out here. And Scott, go ahead and take us out, man.
Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Please tune in again next week. We'll be back here at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific for the Ken and Glenn Show with a guy named Scott.